Welcome to this journey of one of the most disturbing cases in recorded history in Appalachia. Before we begin, I invite you to leave a comment about where you're watching from and the exact time you heard this story. We're interested in knowing where and at what times of day or night these documented accounts arrive. In the autumn of 1904, the Whitford family attempted what would become their final departure from a property that had consumed 3 generations of their lineage. The house, a deteriorating 2-story structure nestled in the remote hollows of eastern Kentucky's Cumberland Mountains, had been built by patriarch Jeremiah Whitford in 1847. What makes this case particularly unsettling is not what happened within those weathered walls, but rather what drove an entire family to abandon everything they owned, not once but repeatedly, only to return each time as if pulled by an invisible thread. The Cumberland County records, archived in 1961 and later transferred to microfilm, contain fragmentary documentation of the Whitford family's peculiar relationship with their homestead. According to the 1900 census, the property housed Jeremiah's son, Marcus Whitford, age 42, his wife Eleanor, age 38, and their adult offspring, Thomas, 22, and Sarah, 19. The family owned approximately 80 acres of mountainous terrain, primarily used for subsistence farming and small-scale logging operations. The Whitford property was located in what locals referred to as Devil's Hollow, a narrow valley carved between 2 limestone ridges approximately 12 miles southeast of Barberville. The hollow received its name not from any supernatural associations, but rather from the peculiar acoustic properties created by the surrounding rock formations. Sound carried in unusual ways throughout the valley, with voices and other noises echoing from unexpected directions and persisting longer than seemed natural, given the topography. Local historian Rebecca Morrison, whose research was compiled in an unpublished manuscript discovered in the Kentucky Historical Society archives in 1964, noted that the Whitford property had an unusual characteristic that set it apart from neighboring homesteads. The house had been constructed with an abnormal number of doors, 14 in total according to a property assessment conducted in 1895. Most mountain homes of that era featured 3 to 5 doors maximum. Morrison's notes suggest that these additional entrances were not part of the original construction but had been added over time, each generation seemingly compelled to create new ways of entering and exiting the structure. Morrison's research included interviews conducted in the 1930s with elderly residents who had known the Whitford family personally. These interviews, preserved in handwritten notes found among Morrison's personal papers, revealed disturbing details about the family's behavior that were not included in official records. According to Martha Henley, whose family had lived in Devil's Hollow since the 1850s, the Whitfords had always been considered peculiar by their neighbors, though not in ways that initially caused concern. Martha Henley's testimony, recorded during a 1936 interview, described visiting the Whitford house as a young woman in the 1880s. She noted that even then, the family displayed unusual habits regarding the doors of their home. Family members rarely entered or exited through the same door twice in succession, instead following complex patterns of movement that seemed to serve no practical purpose. When questioned about this behavior, the Whitfords would simply state that different doors serve different purposes and offer no further explanation. The acoustic peculiarities of Devil's Hollow played a significant role in the isolation experienced by families living in the area. Conversations carried on at normal speaking volume could be heard clearly at distances of over half a mile, while sounds originating from specific locations within the hollow seemed to disappear entirely, creating pockets of unnatural silence. These acoustic anomalies meant that residents of the hollow developed habitual patterns of speaking in whispers and moving with deliberate quietness to avoid unwanted attention from neighbors. For the Whitford family, this acoustic environment appeared to create heightened sensitivity to sound and movement within their own home. Multiple visitors to the property during the 1890s noted that the family members seemed constantly aware of the position and activities of other household members, responding to sounds that were inaudible to guests. This heightened awareness extended to the doors throughout the house, with family members apparently able to detect when any door was opened or closed, regardless of their location within the structure. The first documented attempt at abandonment occurred in March of 1901. Marcus Whitford appeared at the county clerk's office in Barberville, attempting to transfer the property deed to his brother-in-law, Samuel Henley, who lived in neighboring Bell County. The clerk's records, preserved in a leather-bound ledger found during a 1958 courthouse renovation, indicate that Whitford appeared agitated and spoke in circles about the necessity of immediate departure. However, the transfer was never completed. Henley reportedly visited the property once, spent a single night in the house, and returned the next morning to refuse the deed entirely. The circumstances surrounding Marcus Whitford's attempt to transfer the property were more complex than initial records suggested. According to additional documentation discovered in the Bell County Courthouse archives in 1963, Samuel Henley had been corresponding with Marcus throughout the winter of 1900-1901. These letters, preserved in Henley's personal papers, reveal that Marcus had been requesting his brother-in-law's assistance for months before appearing at the courthouse. In a letter dated January 15, 1901, Marcus wrote to Henley, "The house has become difficult to manage. Eleanor and the young ones have developed habits that I cannot adequately explain or control. We require assistance or alternative arrangements before the situation becomes more problematic." Henley's response, dated February 3, 1901, requested specific details about the nature of the family's difficulties. Marcus's reply, written in increasingly erratic handwriting, described persistent concerns regarding the security of our home and the necessity for constant monitoring of all access points. According to a letter dated April 15, 1901, found among the personal effects of Samuel Henley's estate in 1943, Henley wrote to his wife describing his experience at the Whitford house. The structure itself appears sound, though the wind creates unusual patterns of sound throughout the night. More concerning is the behavior of the family members, who seem to have developed peculiar habits of movement within their own home. They rarely remain in any single room for extended periods, instead moving constantly from door to door, as if checking and rechecking each entrance. Henley's letter continued with more detailed observations that provide insight into the daily routines that had developed within the Whitford household by 1901. He noted that meals were consumed standing near doorways rather than seated at the kitchen table. Family members slept in shifts, with at least one person remaining awake throughout the night to monitor the various entrances to the house. Most disturbing to Henley was his observation that the family had developed a complex system of signals, hand gestures, positioning, and brief sounds that allowed them to communicate without speaking aloud. The single night that Henley spent in the Whitford house provided the most detailed account of the family's nighttime routines. According to his letter, beginning at sunset, the family engaged in what appeared to be a security protocol that lasted approximately 2 hours. Each family member was assigned specific doors to check, lock, and monitor. This process involved not only securing the entrances, but also testing each door multiple times to ensure proper function. Henley described being awakened repeatedly throughout the night by sounds of movement within the house. When he investigated, he discovered family members moving between rooms in patterns that seemed to serve no obvious purpose other than maintaining awareness of the status of each door. Marcus Whitford explained that the house requires attention during dark hours and that neglecting proper oversight creates problems that are difficult to resolve. The family's departure in 1901 lasted exactly 43 days. They relocated to Eleanor's sister's property near Pineville, staying in a small cabin approximately 15 miles from their original homestead. During this period, according to letters Eleanor wrote to her cousin in Virginia, the family members experienced what she described as a persistent restlessness and inability to settle into any routine. Thomas and Sarah, both adults, repeatedly requested permission to return to the property to retrieve items they claimed to have forgotten. Eleanor's correspondence during this period, archived with the Pineville Historical Society and cataloged in 1967, reveals the profound psychological impact that separation from their home had on the family members. Her letters describe increasing agitation among all family members, manifesting in behaviors that their temporary hosts found difficult to understand. The family members would spend hours each day standing near the doors of their temporary cabin, apparently listening for sounds that others could not detect. More concerning was Eleanor's description of her family's sleeping patterns during their exile. Despite being exhausted from their journey and the stress of displacement, none of the family members could sleep for more than 2 hours at a time. They would awaken suddenly, as if responding to some unheard signal, and spend time moving around the cabin, checking doors and windows. This behavior disturbed their hosts, who began to question whether the family was mentally stable. Thomas and Sarah's behavior during this period was particularly troubling. Both had been functional adults with normal social interactions before their departure from Devil's Hollow. However, during their stay in Pineville, they became increasingly withdrawn and fixated on returning to their home. Thomas abandoned his normal speech patterns, communicating primarily through gestures and positioning himself near doors when he wanted to convey information to other family members. Sarah's behavior was even more concerning. She had previously been the most socially engaged member of the family, maintaining friendships with neighbors and participating in community activities. During their exile, however, she ceased speaking entirely for days at a time, responding to questions only with specific movements between different areas of their temporary cabin. When she did speak, it was primarily to request updates about the condition of their abandoned home. Eleanor's letters reveal growing tension during their exile from the property. She wrote, "Marcus speaks of the house daily, not with longing, but with a resignation that troubles me greatly. He insists we must return, though he cannot adequately explain why." The younger ones have begun walking the property line at their aunt's farm, as if measuring distances and calculating routes back to our home. The family's obsession with their abandoned property manifested in increasingly specific ways during their time in Pineville. Marcus began drawing detailed maps of their home, focusing particularly on the locations and orientations of the 14 doors. These maps, discovered among Eleanor's sister's possessions in 1954, show intricate detail about door measurements, swing directions, and the relationships between different entrances. Most puzzling was Marcus's inclusion of what appeared to be planned modifications to the door system, suggesting additional entrances that did not yet exist. Thomas's behavior during this period included daily expeditions around the perimeter of his aunt's property, during which he would practice complex movement patterns that appeared to correspond to the layout of their abandoned home. Observers noted that he would approach different structures, barns, sheds, fences, as if they were doors, going through elaborate rituals of opening, closing, and securing these substitute entrances. The psychological strain of separation from their home began to affect the family's physical health as well. Eleanor's letters describe increasing fatigue, loss of appetite, and what she termed a persistent feeling of incompleteness. All family members lost significant weight during their 43-day exile, despite having adequate food and shelter. Their hosts noted that the family seemed to be experiencing a form of withdrawal that affected both their mental and physical well-being. Most disturbing was the development of what Eleanor described as shared dreams among the family members. According to her letters, all 4 family members began experiencing identical nighttime experiences involving detailed scenarios about their abandoned home. These dreams focused specifically on the doors of the house, with family members describing elaborate sequences in which they moved through the structure, securing and monitoring each entrance according to increasingly complex protocols. The family's return to the Whitford property in May 1901 was abrupt and, according to Eleanor's sister, occurred without warning. They departed the Pineville cabin before dawn, leaving behind most of their relocated possessions. A notation in the Cumberland County Sheriff's records indicates that neighbors reported seeing lamplight in the Whitford house windows that same evening, suggesting an immediate reoccupation. The circumstances of their return were as mysterious as their original departure. Eleanor's sister reported that the family had seemed to be adapting to life in Pineville, with some improvement in their sleep patterns and social interactions during the final week of their stay. However, on the morning of their departure, she discovered that they had packed and left without any discussion or farewell. A note left in their temporary cabin simply stated, "The doors require attention. We must return immediately." For the next 3 years, the family appeared to settle into a routine, though one markedly different from their pre-1901 lifestyle. Thomas Whitford had previously worked as a timber surveyor for the Cumberland Gap Railroad Company, traveling throughout the region for weeks at a time. After their return, however, he ceased this employment and remained exclusively on the family property. Similarly, Sarah, who had previously taught at a small schoolhouse in the valley below their home, ended her teaching position and withdrew from all community activities. The isolation of the Whitford family during this period became a subject of local concern. Reverend Charles Milliken of the Barberville Methodist Church noted in his weekly reports, preserved in church archives discovered in 1962, that the family ceased attending Sunday services in the summer of 1902. When he visited their property in August of that year, he found the family members present and seemingly in good health, though exhibiting behaviors I found difficult to understand. Reverend Milliken's report describes a household where normal family interactions appeared to have been replaced by a complex system of movements and spatial arrangements. He observed that family members rarely spoke directly to one another, instead communicating through positioning within the house. If Eleanor wished to indicate something to Marcus, she would move to a specific doorway. If Sarah needed to communicate with Thomas, she would place herself near a particular window. This nonverbal system seemed to function efficiently, though Milliken noted that it created an atmosphere of profound silence throughout the house. The transformation of the Whitford family's communication patterns represented a complete departure from their previous social norms. Reverend Milliken's detailed observations, recorded in his personal diary, describe a household that had developed its own internal language based entirely on movement, positioning, and spatial relationships. Family members could convey complex information through their choice of doorway, the direction they faced while standing, and the duration of their presence in specific locations. This communication system extended to practical household management as well. Meal preparation, cleaning tasks, and other domestic activities were coordinated through positioning and movement, rather than verbal instruction. Milliken observed Eleanor directing household activities by moving from door to door in specific sequences, with other family members responding by initiating different tasks based on her location and orientation within the house. Most disturbing to Reverend Milliken was the realization that this nonverbal communication system required constant visual contact among family members. No one could be completely alone in any part of the house, as isolation would break the communication network that had replaced normal speech. This meant that family members were continuously aware of each other's locations and activities, creating an atmosphere of perpetual surveillance within their own home. During his visit, Reverend Milliken was offered a meal and invited to spend the night due to approaching darkness and the treacherous mountain paths. His account of that evening, preserved in a personal diary discovered among church documents in 1965, provides the most detailed description of daily life within the Whitford household during this period. According to Milliken's diary, the family prepared for sleep through an elaborate ritual of checking and securing the 14 doors throughout the house. This process took approximately 45 minutes and involved each family member taking responsibility for specific entrances. Marcus secured the 5 doors on the ground level. Thomas managed the 4 doors leading to upper rooms. Sarah handled the 3 doors connecting interior chambers, and Eleanor was responsible for the 2 doors leading to root cellars and storage areas. What disturbed Reverend Milliken most profoundly was the discovery that several of these doors led to identical rooms or appeared to serve no practical purpose. 3 doors on the second floor opened into the same bedroom space. 2 doors in the kitchen area led to the same pantry. Most unsettling, 2 doors in the main living area opened directly onto interior walls, with no room or passage beyond. Milliken's investigation of these non-functional doors revealed that they had been added to the house over a period of years, apparently without regard for practical utility. The family had invested significant time and resources in creating entrances that served no transportation or access purposes. When he questioned Marcus about these doors, the response was simply that each door serves its proper function and that the system requires completion. The doors that opened onto solid walls were particularly puzzling. These had been constructed with the same care and attention to detail as the functional entrances, complete with properly fitted frames, hinges, and locking mechanisms. The family treated these non-functional doors exactly the same as those that provided actual access to rooms or exterior spaces, checking and securing them according to the same elaborate protocols. Milliken's diary entry describes his growing realization that the family's relationship with their home had evolved beyond normal domestic arrangements into something approaching ritual behavior. The doors had become objects of significance independent of their practical function, with each entrance representing a component in a system that the family felt compelled to maintain through constant attention and care. Milliken's diary entry concludes with his observation that, despite the family's methodical securing of all 14 doors each night, he was awakened repeatedly by the sound of doors opening and closing throughout the house. When he mentioned this the following morning, the family members exchanged glances but provided no explanation. Marcus simply stated that the house requires constant attention and that some doors must be opened regularly to maintain proper balance. The sounds that disturbed Milliken throughout the night were not random or chaotic. According to his detailed notes, the door activity followed specific patterns, with different entrances being accessed in particular sequences at regular intervals. This suggested that the family maintained a schedule of door monitoring that continued throughout the night, despite their apparent retirement to their sleeping areas. Most concerning to Milliken was his realization that the family members seemed to be responding to these nighttime door sounds as if they were normal and expected. No one appeared startled or concerned when doors opened and closed during what should have been quiet sleeping hours. Instead, the family seemed to treat these activities as necessary components of proper household management. When Milliken attempted to investigate the source of the nighttime door activity, he discovered that tracking the sounds through the house was nearly impossible. The acoustic properties of the structure, combined with the number and positioning of the doors, created a complex audio environment where the origin and direction of sounds were difficult to determine. This meant that family members required intimate familiarity with the house to understand the meaning and implications of different door-related sounds. The second documented abandonment attempt occurred in September 1904. This departure differed significantly from the first, as the family made no effort to transfer the property or arrange alternative accommodation. Instead, according to a report filed by the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, they simply walked away from the house, leaving the doors open and taking only the clothing they wore. The circumstances leading to this second abandonment were documented through observations made by William Crawford, whose property adjoined the Whitford land. Crawford had been monitoring the Whitford family's activities with increasing concern throughout the summer of 1904, noting escalating peculiarities in their behavior that extended beyond their usual door-related obsessions. Crawford's written statement, preserved in the sheriff's files, describes observing the family engaged in excavation activities around their house, beginning in June 1904. Using hand tools, family members spent long hours digging narrow trenches that appeared to connect different doors of their home. These excavations were conducted with systematic precision, with family members working in shifts to maintain continuous progress on what appeared to be an extensive underground project. By August 1904, Crawford observed that the family's excavation work had expanded beyond simple trenches to include more substantial underground chambers. Family members were spending increasing amounts of time below ground, with some days passing without any visible activity above the surface. Crawford noted that lamplight could be observed emanating from various points around the property at night, suggesting that the underground network included multiple access points and was being used for extended periods. The family's behavior during this underground construction period became increasingly erratic. Crawford reported that normal domestic activities, cooking, cleaning, farming, appeared to have been abandoned in favor of continuous work on the subterranean project. The family seemed to be subsisting on minimal food and showing signs of physical exhaustion, yet they continued their excavation work with relentless determination. Most alarming to Crawford was his observation that the family's communication patterns had evolved even further from the nonverbal system that Reverend Milliken had documented. Family members now seemed to coordinate their activities without any visible communication at all, working together on complex tasks as if responding to unspoken signals or shared understanding that excluded outside comprehension. A neighbor, William Crawford, whose property adjoined the Whitford land, discovered the abandoned house 3 days after the family's departure. His statement, recorded in sheriff's records found during a 1959 courthouse archive reorganization, describes finding the house completely empty of personal belongings, with all 14 doors standing open. Crawford noted that the wind moving through the structure created a sound unlike anything I had heard before, as if the house itself was breathing. Crawford's discovery of the abandoned property revealed the full extent of the family's underground construction project. The excavations had created a complex network of tunnels and chambers that connected not only the 14 doors of the house, but extended throughout the property to include additional entrances that had been installed in various outdoor locations. Crawford counted over 30 separate door installations, including freestanding frames positioned in seemingly arbitrary locations across the family's land. The underground network showed evidence of careful planning and sophisticated engineering. Tunnels were properly shored with timber supports, and chambers included ventilation systems that prevented the accumulation of dangerous gases. The construction quality suggested that the family had acquired construction knowledge and skills that went far beyond their previous experience with basic home maintenance and farming activities. Most puzzling to Crawford was the discovery that the underground system included areas that appeared to be designed for long-term habitation. These spaces contained sleeping areas, food storage, and other amenities that suggested the family had been preparing to live permanently below ground. However, these areas showed no signs of recent use, indicating that whatever had driven the family to abandon their property had occurred before they completed their transition to underground living. Crawford's exploration of the tunnel system revealed that the family had been working toward a specific goal rather than simply expanding their underground network randomly. The tunnels were designed to create alternative pathways between all door locations, allowing movement throughout the property without using surface roads. This would have enabled the family to monitor and maintain all of their door installations while remaining completely hidden from outside observation. Crawford's discovery launched the most extensive search effort ever mounted in Cumberland County for a missing family. The terrain surrounding the Whitford property included dense forests, deep hollows, and numerous limestone caves. Search parties, organized by Sheriff Benjamin Hayes, covered a radius of 20 miles from the abandoned homestead. The search efforts, documented in daily reports preserved in the Kentucky State Archives, uncovered several disturbing findings. In a cave approximately 2 miles northeast of the Whitford house, searchers found evidence of recent habitation, bedding, food supplies, and personal items belonging to the family. However, the cave showed signs of hasty abandonment, with belongings scattered as if the occupants had departed suddenly. The items found in the cave included detailed maps and diagrams related to the family's door installation project. These documents revealed that the Whitford family had been planning to extend their door network far beyond their own property, with proposed installations throughout Devil's Hollow and into neighboring valleys. The scope of their planned project suggested an obsession that had grown far beyond any practical or rational purpose. More puzzling was the discovery of a trail of opened doors throughout the mountainous region. Barns, storage sheds, and even the doors of neighboring homes had been found standing open during the nights following the Whitford family's disappearance. Crawford and other neighbors reported that secured buildings were repeatedly found with doors ajar, despite being properly closed the previous evening. The pattern of open doors throughout the region suggested that the Whitford family had been moving through the area, systematically accessing buildings and structures in ways that avoided detection during daylight hours. However, the geographic distribution of these incidents covered an area that would have been impossible for 4 people to traverse in a single night, raising questions about the family's movements and activities that searchers could not adequately explain. Sheriff Hayes' investigation revealed that the door-opening incidents followed specific patterns related to the types of buildings and their locations relative to the Whitford property. Farm structures were targeted more frequently than residential buildings, and the incidents were concentrated along routes that connected natural cave systems and other potential shelter locations. This suggested that the family was following predetermined pathways through the region, using the underground knowledge they had gained during their excavation work to move undetected through the mountains. On October 12, 1904, 18 days after the family's disappearance, they were found walking along the road leading back to their property. Deputy Sheriff James Morton's report describes encountering the family approximately 1 mile from their homestead, traveling on foot in single file, carrying no possessions. When questioned about their whereabouts during the preceding weeks, family members provided no coherent explanation. Morton's report notes that the family members appeared physically unharmed, but exhibited signs of exhaustion and what he described as a peculiar form of focused determination. They expressed no interest in discussing their absence and insisted only on returning immediately to their house. Marcus Whitford told Morton that they had completed necessary preparations and were ready to properly maintain the property. The physical condition of the family members when they were discovered suggested that they had been living outdoors for the entire 18-day period, yet they showed no signs of malnutrition or exposure-related illness. Their clothing, while worn, was not excessively damaged, and they appeared to have maintained basic hygiene, despite having no access to normal washing facilities. This suggested that they had found adequate shelter and resources during their absence from their home. Most puzzling to Morton was the family's behavior during their return journey to the property. They walked in single file, maintaining precise spacing between each person and stopped periodically to examine specific locations along the route. These stops appeared to correspond to points where doors had been found open during the search period, suggesting that the family was checking on installations or modifications they had made during their time away from home. When Morton attempted to question the family about their activities during their absence, their responses were cryptic and focused entirely on their plans for returning to their property. They spoke of completing the system and ensuring proper functionality, but would not elaborate on what these phrases meant. Their single-minded focus on returning home, combined with their apparent indifference to the concern and effort that had been devoted to searching for them, struck Morton as profoundly abnormal. The family's reoccupation of their house in October 1904 marked the beginning of the most disturbing period in the documented history of the Whitford property. Neighbors reported that the family's behavior became increasingly erratic, with sightings of family members moving around the exterior of their house at all hours, apparently engaged in maintenance activities that involved constantly opening and closing the various doors. William Crawford's written statement to Sheriff Hayes, dated November 3, 1904, describes observing the family through field glasses from his own property. Crawford noted that the Whitfords appeared to be following a precise schedule of door-related activities. Every few hours, all 4 family members would emerge from the house simultaneously, each approaching different doors around the structure. They would open these doors, remain stationary for several minutes, then close them and return inside. This routine continued throughout daylight hours and, according to Crawford, well into the night, when lamplight made their activities visible. Crawford's observations revealed that the family's door maintenance routine had evolved into an elaborate system that required coordination among all 4 family members. Each person was responsible for specific doors, and their activities were timed to ensure that all 14 entrances were attended to according to a schedule that Crawford estimated repeated every 3 hours. This meant that the family was engaging in door maintenance activities 8 times per day, with each cycle requiring approximately 45 minutes to complete. The precision and consistency of these activities suggested that the family had developed their door maintenance system into a form of mechanical routine that dominated their daily existence. Crawford noted that the family appeared to eat, sleep, and conduct other necessary activities only during brief intervals between their door maintenance cycles. This level of obsessive attention to their door system represented a complete transformation from the relatively normal, if somewhat eccentric, behavior that neighbors had observed before 1901. Most disturbing to Crawford was his realization that the family's door maintenance activities were expanding beyond their own property. He began to observe family members conducting similar routines at the additional door installations they had created throughout their land during their excavation project. This meant that their maintenance cycles were becoming increasingly complex and time-consuming, requiring longer periods to complete each round of door attention. Crawford's documentation of the family's activities during this period provides the most detailed account of how their obsession with doors had evolved into a comprehensive lifestyle that excluded normal human activities. The family members appeared to exist solely to serve their door maintenance system, with no apparent awareness of or interest in activities that did not relate directly to their elaborate entrance monitoring project. The final chapter in the documented history of the Whitford family began in December 1904. On December 8th, neighbors reported seeing smoke rising from the house chimney, but no signs of the family members themselves. This prompted Crawford to investigate, leading to the discovery that would end the Whitford occupation of their ancestral property permanently. Crawford found the house empty once again, but this time the scene differed dramatically from previous abandonments. All 14 doors had been removed from their hinges and arranged in a precise pattern in the main room of the house. The doors were positioned to create a complex, maze-like structure with passages leading from one doorframe to another in what Crawford described as a path that seemed to fold back upon itself repeatedly. The arrangement of doors within the house demonstrated a level of planning and symbolic thinking that went far beyond the family's previous activities. Crawford's detailed measurements, preserved in sheriff's records, show that the doors had been positioned according to mathematical relationships that corresponded to their original locations throughout the house. The maze created by these doors replicated the floor plan of the entire structure, but in compressed form within the single main room. Personal belongings remained in the house, arranged as if the family had simply stepped away momentarily. Meals sat half-finished on the kitchen table. Beds showed evidence of recent use. Most unsettling to Crawford was the discovery of 14 handwritten notes, one placed in each doorframe of the improvised indoor maze. Each note contained the same message, written in different handwriting that corresponded to each family member. The path is finally clear. The handwriting analysis conducted by Sheriff Hayes revealed that each family member had contributed multiple notes to the collection, suggesting that the door arrangement and note placement had been a collaborative effort that involved extensive planning and coordination. The notes themselves were written in different styles and with varying degrees of legibility, indicating that they had been composed at different times and under different circumstances. Most puzzling was the discovery that some of the notes contained text that did not match any known handwriting samples from the family members. These additional messages included detailed instructions for maintaining the door arrangement, suggestions for modifications to the system, and references to others who will continue the work. The origin and meaning of these additional notes remained unexplained, as they did not correspond to any known visitors or associates of the family. Sheriff Hayes's investigation of the abandoned property, documented in reports filed with the state of Kentucky and archived in 1963, revealed additional disturbing details. The basement of the house contained evidence of extensive excavation work. Sections of the foundation had been carefully removed, creating passages that appeared to connect with natural cave systems beneath the property. These underground passages showed signs of recent use, with bedding and food supplies indicating prolonged habitation. The underground network discovered by Hayes was far more extensive than the excavations observed by Crawford during the summer and fall of 1904. The family had created a complete alternative living environment beneath their house, with chambers for sleeping, food preparation, storage, and other domestic activities. This underground space showed evidence of careful planning and construction, with proper ventilation, drainage, and structural support systems. Most significantly, Hayes discovered that the underground network created by the family's excavations connected all 14 original door locations of the house. The family had essentially created an alternative means of moving between each entrance to their home without using the interior spaces of the house itself. Maps drawn by Hayes and preserved in the case files suggest that this underground system would have allowed someone to travel from any door to any other door through a network of tunnels and cave passages. The sophistication of the underground construction suggested that the family had acquired engineering and construction knowledge that went far beyond their previous experience. The tunnels included features such as stone-lined walls, timber supports, and water management systems that demonstrated understanding of advanced construction techniques. The source of this knowledge remained unexplained, as there was no evidence that any family member had received formal training in underground construction or mining engineering. Hayes' investigation also revealed that the underground network extended far beyond the immediate area of the house, connecting to natural cave systems that provided access to locations throughout Devil's Hollow and into neighboring valleys. This meant that the family could potentially travel for miles underground, accessing numerous surface locations without being observed by neighbors or authorities. The scope of this underground network suggested planning and construction efforts that would have required years of continuous work. The final documented sighting of the Whitford family occurred on December 15, 1904. A traveling merchant named Harrison Beck, whose route included the remote mountain communities of Cumberland County, reported encountering 4 individuals walking along a ridge line approximately 5 miles from the Whitford property. Beck's statement, given to authorities in Pineville and archived with Bell County records, describes seeing the figures moving in single file along paths that, according to his knowledge of the area, led to uninhabited wilderness. Beck noted that the figures appeared to be carrying door frames, though this detail was initially dismissed by authorities as implausible given the weight and awkwardness of such objects for mountain travel. However, subsequent searches of the area identified several locations where door frames had been abandoned along remote paths, apparently discarded when they became too cumbersome to transport further. The door frames discovered along the mountain paths showed evidence of modification for transport purposes. Hinges and hardware had been removed, and the frames had been disassembled into components that could be carried more easily. Some frames showed signs of being partially buried or concealed, suggesting that the family had been creating supply caches along their travel route for future retrieval. Beck's description of the figures he observed indicated that they were moving with purpose and destination in mind, rather than wandering aimlessly through the wilderness. Their route followed ridge lines and other natural features that would provide concealment from observation while maintaining access to water sources and potential shelter locations. This suggested that the family had planned their departure carefully and possessed detailed knowledge of the regional geography that extended far beyond their immediate neighborhood. Most significantly, Beck's sighting occurred along a route that would provide access to extensive cave systems in the eastern Kentucky mountains. These caves were known to local residents, but rarely visited due to their remote locations and difficult access. The possibility that the family was seeking to establish themselves in these cave systems suggested that their underground construction work at their home property had been preparation for a transition to permanent subterranean living. The investigation into the Whitford family's disappearance was officially closed in March 1905. Sheriff Hayes concluded that the family had chosen to relocate to an unknown destination and recommended that the property be classified as abandoned. However, the case file notes Hayes's personal observation that the behavior exhibited by this family suggests circumstances beyond normal relocation preferences. Hayes's final report included recommendations that the property be monitored for potential safety hazards related to the extensive underground excavations. He noted that the tunnel system created by the family posed risks of collapse or cave-in that could affect neighboring properties. Additionally, he recommended that the various door installations throughout the property be removed or secured to prevent potential injuries to future visitors or trespassers. The official closure of the investigation did not end interest in the Whitford case among local residents and authorities. The Cumberland County Historical Society, established in 1923, conducted several informal investigations of the abandoned property during the 1920s and 1930s. These investigations, documented in the Society's meeting minutes and archived in 1952, revealed that the property continued to exhibit unusual characteristics long after the family's departure. The Whitford property remained uninhabited for 3 years following the family's final departure. During this period, neighbors reported ongoing disturbances at the abandoned house. Doors throughout the structure were repeatedly found standing open, despite previous efforts to secure the building. Local residents began avoiding the property entirely after numerous reports of sounds emanating from the house during nighttime hours. The sounds reported by neighbors during this period were consistent with the door-related activities that had characterized the family's behavior during their final months at the property. Residents living within hearing distance of the abandoned house reported regular sounds of doors opening and closing throughout the night, following patterns that seemed too systematic to be explained by wind or structural settling. These sounds continued for months after the family's departure, suggesting either ongoing human activity at the property or some form of mechanical system that continued to function without human intervention. William Crawford, who had been the primary observer of the family's activities during their final months at the property, conducted several investigations of the abandoned house during this period. His written reports, submitted to Sheriff Hayes and preserved in county records, document his discovery that the elaborate door arrangements created by the family before their departure had been maintained and even modified during their absence. Crawford found that the maze of doors arranged in the main room of the house had been reconfigured multiple times, with doors moved to new positions and arrangements that followed patterns he could not understand. Most disturbing was his realization that these modifications required knowledge of the family system and intentions that could only have come from continued human involvement with the property. However, despite numerous visits to the abandoned house, Crawford never encountered evidence of ongoing habitation or recent human presence. The underground network created by the family also showed signs of continued use during this period. Crawford's exploration of accessible portions of the tunnel system revealed that passages were being maintained and even expanded with new excavations and structural improvements that demonstrated ongoing construction activity. Food supplies, bedding, and other evidence of habitation could be found in various underground chambers, yet Crawford never encountered the individuals responsible for these activities. In 1908, the property was claimed by Cumberland County for unpaid taxes and subsequently sold to a logging company operating in the region. The company's plan to clear the land for timber harvesting was abandoned after work crews refused to continue operations near the house. Foreman's reports, preserved in the company's business records and discovered during a 1966 corporate archive review, describe workers experiencing profound discomfort when working within sight of the structure. According to these reports, work crews complained of persistent sensations that they were being observed while working near the property. More significantly, workers reported that tools and equipment left near the house overnight were consistently found in different locations the following morning, despite the site being secured. The logging company terminated its contract for the Whitford property in 1909, citing operational difficulties related to site conditions. The logging company's experience with the property provided the first documented evidence that the unusual phenomena associated with the Whitford homestead continued to affect individuals other than the original family. Workers reported developing obsessive behaviors related to the doors and entrances of their own homes after working near the property. Several crew members began conducting elaborate door-checking routines similar to those observed in the Whitford family, though none could explain the origin or necessity of these behaviors. Company records describe incidents in which workers would abandon their assigned tasks to investigate sounds or movement near the abandoned house, only to find no evidence of activity upon arrival. These incidents became so frequent and disruptive that work supervisors were forced to assign crew members to duties that kept them beyond visual range of the property. However, even workers stationed in distant areas reported feeling compelled to monitor the abandoned house and expressed anxiety about the security of its various entrances. The psychological impact of the property on workers extended beyond the immediate work site. Several crew members reported changes in their sleep patterns and domestic routines that persisted long after their work in the area was completed. These changes included increased sensitivity to sounds within their own homes, particularly sounds related to doors and windows, and a compulsive need to check and secure entrances multiple times before retiring for the night. A final attempt to utilize the Whitford property occurred in 1912 when a mining company acquired the land to explore potential coal deposits. The company's geological survey, conducted over a 6-week period, resulted in the most comprehensive documentation of the underground network created by the Whitford family. Survey maps preserved in the Kentucky Department of Natural Resources archives revealed that the family's excavations had extended far beyond the immediate area of their house. The mining company's chief surveyor, Robert Finch, submitted a report describing an underground network that encompassed nearly 40 acres of the property. According to Finch's findings, the tunnels created by the family connected not only the 14 door locations of their house, but also extended to numerous points throughout their property where doors had been installed in seemingly arbitrary locations, the sides of trees, rock faces, and even freestanding door frames positioned in open fields. Finch's survey revealed the full scope of the Whitford family's door installation project. Over 60 separate door locations were identified throughout the property, each connected to the underground network through carefully constructed passages. The engineering required to create this system was far beyond what would be expected from a family with no formal construction training, suggesting that the project had involved significant planning, research, and skill development. The door installations themselves showed evidence of continuous modification and improvement. Finch noted that many doors had been replaced multiple times, with newer installations demonstrating more sophisticated construction techniques and materials. This suggested that the family had been continuously developing their door-related skills and knowledge throughout their years at the property. Most puzzling to Finch was his observation that the underground network and door installations appeared to be designed according to principles that were not immediately apparent to his engineering team. The passages did not follow efficient routes between destinations, but instead created complex paths that often led to dead ends or circular routes. Many sections of the tunnel system appeared to serve no practical purpose other than providing alternative routes between identical destinations. Finch's report notes that the underground network appeared to be designed according to principles that were not immediately apparent to his engineering team. The passages did not follow efficient routes between destinations, but instead created complex paths that often led to dead ends or circular routes. Most puzzling to Finch was his observation that many sections of the tunnel system appeared to serve no practical purpose other than providing alternative routes between identical destinations. The complexity of the underground system suggested that its design served psychological or symbolic purposes rather than purely practical ones. Finch noted that the family appeared to have been creating a physical manifestation of some internal logic or belief system that required specific spatial relationships between entrances and passages. The underground network functioned as a three-dimensional representation of concepts that could not be understood through conventional architectural or engineering analysis. The mining company abandoned their operations on the Whitford property after 6 weeks, citing safety concerns related to the extensive underground excavations. Company records indicate that survey crew members reported experiencing disorientation while working in the tunnel system, with several incidents of workers becoming lost in passages they had previously mapped and marked. The disorientation experienced by survey crews was not limited to simple confusion about directions or locations. Workers reported experiencing what Finch described as temporal displacement, in which they would enter a tunnel for what seemed like a brief exploration and emerge hours later with no memory of the intervening time. These incidents occurred repeatedly, despite efforts to implement safety protocols and maintain constant communication between team members. Finch's final report, submitted to company executives and archived with the Kentucky Department of Natural Resources in 1959, concluded with an observation that would become the last official documentation related to the Whitford property. The underground network created by the previous occupants of this land appears to have been designed not for practical transportation purposes, but rather to satisfy some form of compulsive behavioral requirement that we cannot adequately understand or evaluate. The property remained under the ownership of various entities through the following decades, though no successful development or habitation occurred. The house gradually deteriorated due to weather exposure and neglect, with the roof collapsing in the winter of 1923. However, according to county records, the 14 door frames remained standing long after the walls and roof had fallen away. The persistence of the door frames in the absence of supporting structures defied normal expectations about building deterioration. County inspectors noted that while all other components of the house had collapsed or been damaged by weather, the door frames maintained their structural integrity and continued to function normally. This phenomenon attracted attention from structural engineers and architects who were unable to explain how unsupported door frames could remain stable and functional for decades. The door frames became a subject of local curiosity and occasional pilgrimage for individuals interested in unusual architectural phenomena. Visitors to the site reported that the doors could still be opened and closed normally, despite having no walls or rooms to provide access to. This created the surreal spectacle of functional doors standing alone in an open field, serving no apparent purpose yet maintaining their mechanical integrity. The last recorded interaction with the Whitford property occurred in 1961, when a team of anthropologists from the University of Kentucky conducted a study of abandoned homesteads in the Cumberland Mountains. Professor Margaret Sinclair's research team spent 3 days documenting the site, creating detailed photographs and measurements of the remaining structures. Professor Sinclair's field notes, archived with the university's anthropology department and sealed in 1967 due to concerns regarding the psychological impact of the documented findings on research staff, described the discovery that the 14 door frames had been maintained in functional condition despite 57 years of abandonment. The doors themselves had been restored to their frames, and each could be opened and closed normally despite the absence of any walls or roof structure. The restoration of the doors to functional condition suggested ongoing human involvement with the property. Yet Sinclair's team found no evidence of recent habitation or maintenance activity. The doors appeared to have been maintained continuously since the family's departure, yet no individual or organization claimed responsibility for this maintenance. This created a mystery that Sinclair found more disturbing than the original circumstances of the family's disappearance. More significantly, Sinclair's team documented evidence that the underground network created by the Whitford family remained in active use. Fresh bedding, food supplies, and personal items were found in various sections of the tunnel system. These discoveries suggested that individuals had been utilizing the passages regularly, though no inhabitants were encountered during the 3-day study period. The items found in the underground chambers were arranged according to the same spatial principles that had characterized the family's above-ground door arrangements. Personal belongings were positioned relative to specific tunnel entrances, and movement patterns through the underground network appeared to follow systematic routes that maintained specific relationships between different areas of the system. Sinclair's final report, submitted to the university in December 1961 and subsequently classified, noted that her research team experienced difficulty completing their documentation work due to what she described as persistent feelings of being observed and an overwhelming compulsion among team members to continuously check and recheck the positions of the 14 doors. The report concluded with Sinclair's recommendation that the property be designated as unsuitable for academic research due to environmental factors that negatively impact researcher behavior and objectivity. The psychological impact of the property on Sinclair's research team mirrored the experiences reported by previous visitors and workers. Team members developed obsessive behaviors related to door monitoring and spatial awareness that persisted long after their departure from the site. Most disturbing was Sinclair's observation that these behaviors appeared to be contagious, spreading from one team member to another through proximity and shared activities at the property. The fate of the Whitford family members remains unknown. No subsequent records exist documenting their deaths, relocations, or continued existence. The Social Security Administration, in response to a 1954 inquiry from the Cumberland County Historical Society, confirmed that no individuals matching the names and birth dates of the Whitford family had ever been issued Social Security numbers or appeared in any federal records after 1904. The absence of any documentation regarding the family's fate after their departure from the property has led to various theories about their ultimate destination and activities. Some researchers have suggested that the family successfully established themselves in the extensive cave systems of eastern Kentucky, living underground in an extension of the lifestyle they had been developing at their homestead. Others propose that the family died during their wilderness journey, with their remains never discovered due to the remote and inaccessible nature of the terrain. The local oral histories collected by various researchers through the 1940s and 1950s contain occasional references to sightings of individuals matching the descriptions of the Whitford family members in remote areas of the Cumberland Mountains. However, these accounts are typically dismissed as folklore rather than reliable historical documentation. The sightings describe encounters with individuals who exhibited the same obsessive behaviors related to doors and entrances that had characterized the Whitford family, but these behaviors had reportedly expanded to include natural cave openings and other landscape features. The most persistent element of local oral tradition regarding the Whitford case concerns the ongoing reports of door-related disturbances throughout the Cumberland County region. Residents of the area have for generations reported finding doors to their homes, barns, and other structures standing open without explanation. These incidents are typically attributed to wind, settling of old buildings, or simple forgetfulness. However, the consistency and frequency of such reports, particularly in areas surrounding the former Whitford property, has led some local historians to suggest a connection to the family's documented obsessions with door maintenance and monitoring. The geographic distribution of door-related incidents throughout the region corresponds closely to the cave systems and underground networks that the Whitford family had been exploring during their final years at the property. This has led to speculation that the family or their descendants might be continuing their door-related activities throughout the broader area, using underground passages to access buildings and structures without being observed by surface dwellers. The Whitford property itself was acquired by the state of Kentucky in 1965 as part of a land preservation initiative. The site was incorporated into the Cumberland Gap National Historical Park System, though it is not included in public tour routes due to safety concerns related to the underground tunnel network. Park Service documentation indicates that the property is inspected quarterly by maintenance staff, primarily to monitor the stability of the ground in areas where subsidence might occur due to the extensive excavations beneath the surface. According to Park Service records archived in 1968, these quarterly inspections consistently reveal that the 14 door frames at the former house site remain in functional condition despite ongoing exposure to weather and natural deterioration. Each inspection report notes that the doors can be opened and closed normally and appear to have been recently maintained, though no maintenance work is performed by Park Service staff. The persistence of the door functionality in the absence of official maintenance suggests that someone continues to care for the installations, though the identity and motivations of this individual or group remain unknown. Park Service personnel have conducted extensive surveillance of the property in attempts to identify the source of this ongoing maintenance, but these efforts have been unsuccessful. The most recent documented events related to the Whitford case occurred during the winter of 1967. Park Service Inspector James Rothwell submitted a report describing his discovery of fresh footprints in snow around the 14 door frames during a routine inspection in February. The footprints indicated that 4 individuals had visited the site, approaching each door frame in a specific sequence that corresponded to the pattern of movement described in historical accounts of the Whitford family's behavior. Rothwell's report, filed with the National Park Service and archived in 1969, noted that the footprints appeared to begin and end at the same doorframe, suggesting that the visitors had arrived and departed through a single entrance point. However, the pattern of movement indicated that each individual had visited all 14 door locations during their time at the site. Most puzzling to Rothwell was his observation that the footprint pattern suggested the visitors had spent considerable time at each door, apparently engaging in activities that required them to repeatedly open and close each door multiple times. The footprints discovered by Rothwell were consistent with those that would be made by adult humans wearing standard winter footwear. However, the patterns of movement suggested coordination and purpose that indicated familiarity with the site and its history. The visitors had apparently known exactly which doors to visit, and in what sequence, suggesting either extensive prior knowledge of the Whitford family's activities or direct connection to the original occupants of the property. Following Rothwell's report, the National Park Service implemented a policy of continuous monitoring for the Whitford property site. However, subsequent inspections have revealed no additional evidence of unauthorized visitors. The site remains officially classified as a historical preservation area with restricted access, though Park Service documentation acknowledges that effective security monitoring of the property presents unique challenges due to the extensive underground network and multiple access points created by previous occupants. The continued mystery surrounding the Whitford property has attracted attention from researchers studying anomalous historical cases and unexplained phenomena. However, academic investigation of the site has been limited due to the psychological impact that the property appears to have on visitors and researchers. Multiple studies have been terminated prematurely due to the development of obsessive behaviors among research personnel that interfere with objective documentation and analysis. The case of the Whitford family represents one of the most thoroughly documented examples of what behavioral researchers have termed environmental compulsion disorder, a condition in which individuals develop obsessive behavioral patterns related to specific physical locations or structures. However, the Whitford case remains unique due to the involvement of multiple family members in identical compulsive behaviors and the extreme modifications made to their physical environment to accommodate these compulsions. Today, the former Whitford property continues to serve as a case study for researchers investigating the relationship between environment and human behavior. The site is occasionally visited by academic researchers studying historical settlement patterns, architectural modifications, and the impact of isolation on family dynamics. However, such research visits are conducted under strict supervision by the National Park Service due to ongoing safety concerns related to the underground tunnel network and the documented psychological effects of the property on visitors. The 14 door frames remain standing at the site, maintained in functional condition through unknown means. The underground network created by the Whitford family continues to exist beneath the surface, providing passages between entrances that no longer lead to inhabited spaces. And somewhere in the remote hollows and ridges of the Cumberland Mountains, the question remains of what happened to 4 individuals who spent 3 years of their lives creating alternative pathways through a world that seemed determined to keep them trapped within the walls of a single house. The wind still moves through the 14 door frames, standing in the ruins of the Whitford house, creating sounds that visitors describe as both familiar and unsettling. Each door continues to open and close with ease, providing access to nothing and leading nowhere, yet maintained with care that suggests someone still believes in their purpose. The underground passages remain navigable for those brave enough to explore them, offering a glimpse into the elaborate world that one family created when the boundaries between home and obsession disappeared entirely. In the end, the Whitford family achieved something that few families in similar circumstances manage. They created a lasting impact on their physical environment that continues to influence how that space is understood and experienced by others. Whether this impact represents a form of legacy, a warning, or simply the inevitable result of human adaptation to extreme circumstances remains an open question for each individual who encounters their story. What cannot be questioned is the persistence of their vision, a world where every entrance demands attention, every door requires maintenance, and every threshold represents both an ending and a beginning in the endless cycle of departure and return.